Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Anaisa Nisa Quintanilla Arteaga. I am the president of PathSig. We are very excited to kick off our annual Fall Symposium with our resident panel discussion today. Just as a reminder, this session is being recorded, so please make sure that your microphones are muted during the session. We want to thank all of you for your attendance again, and we hope that this session answers some questions that might be on your mind during this interview season. At this time, I'd like to invite other members of the virtual PathSig e-board who helped plan this event introduce themselves. Our Vice President, Jenna Ungst, unfortunately could not be here today, so we will continue on with our event co-chairs.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jerome Gibby. I'm a medical student at West Virginia University, and I'm one of the event co-chairs.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tristan Jordan. I'm a fourth-year medical student from the George Washington University School of Medicine in Washington, D.C., and I'm also the co-event chair.
Now our social media co-chairs.
Hi, everyone. My name is Samir Naser. I'm a fourth-year medical student at San Juan Bautista School of Medicine in Puerto Rico, and I am the social media co-chair.
Hello, everyone. My name is Florette Chong. I'm a student at Trinity School of Medicine, and I am also a social media co-chair.
Our other social media co-chairs who are unable to join us today are Sarah Faruqi and Ahmed MVP. Everyone helped plan this event and have been a huge part in all of our endeavors to put together this event and promote it. So now we'd like to introduce our panel of residents. I'll ask each of you to introduce yourselves and tell us what institution you're training at. Let's start with Dr. Udofia.
Hi, everyone. My name is Daram Fon Udofia, and I'm training at University of New Mexico. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Dr. Lilly.
Hey everyone, my name is Cullen Lilly. I am a first year pathology resident APCP at UCLA.
Thank you. Dr. Olapeju.
Hi everyone, I'm Larry Olapeju. I'm a PGY1 resident at West Virginia University. I'm very excited to be here and I look forward to the event.
Thank you. Dr. Herman.
Hi, everybody. I am at University of Michigan right now, and I'm a first year just like Colin, and I'm happy to answer any questions and be of any assistance.
Thank you. And Dr. Ali.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maher. I'm at PGY1 resident at George Washington University. It's nice to meet you all.
Thank you all so much. And with that, I will hand things off to our event co-chairs.
Great. We're all so glad to have you all. Thank you all to each of our panelists for coming here today and answering some of our questions, and to all of you for participating in the event. So we've given our panelists a list of questions that we'll run through today through the Q&A, and then at the end, if there's any extra time, we'll open it up for questions from you all. Just a reminder that this event will be recorded and we'll post it online in a few days. Tristan, you want to kick us off?
Great. So to kick things off, the first question is for Dr. Herman. So we're currently in the interview season for pathology residency program application cycle. And the first question is, what are the steps that interviewers need to take to prepare for the interview?
Well, it's a good thing you asked me that because I've actually done a lot of work to prepare some resources for you guys, which I'll share in the chat. My recommendation is, of course, do your research on the program before you go in. You do the night before, read up who's interviewing you, so know their background, what they do in pathology, and then create specific questions for them when you meet with them. Have some tailored questions for each program and know the pros and cons, and if there's anything that's changing or under development, you want to make sure you ask about that and what changes are going to occur that year and what to expect as a resident. And of course, have your list of questions ready to go. I think it helps be more prepared than underprepared, and you're going to have a lot of time to ask questions. So you don't want to run out of questions. And of course, like follow the tips and tricks on getting a good virtual interview set up. Make sure you have good internet connection and everything's plugged into the power. Practice interview questions with a friend or other student or resident or physician, and just get some feedback on how you answer questions, and have like I said, have questions ready to go, and have a spreadsheet or some notes that you can take during the interview so you can stay organized. That's kind of like the broad spectrum kind of approach to it. And there's a lot more that others can chime in about, but I'll share some resources and that will help guide you through. And also, Colin made a really great cheat sheet for interviews. So I'll share that as well, because that is something I wish I had. I was using an old Excel, sheet, and I wish I had something as beautiful and organized as what he made. So I'll share that in the chat soon.
Since we touched on that, I guess I can also chime in, because I think it's super important to, yes, have a good research on what's going on with the program and everything that Dr. Herman had already said. But I think having some way of being able to compare things across programs, like at least knowing what you're looking for in programs, that can really help, structure how you are comparing the different programs, because that kind of helps later down the line. So, at the very beginning, kind of get an idea of how programs are set up and what their different rotations are like. And then you can kind of have a better idea later on, when you're kind of all interviewed out and your brain is completely mush. You can actually compare things, and then it'll make more sense at the end of the day.
Thank you all. And I should have reinforced at the beginning, if we'll direct questions at one panelist, but if any of you all have anything else to say, feel free to chime in as well. But the next question is for Dr. Olapeju, Larry. What are some of the questions that interviewers should be prepared to answer in a pathology residency interview?
So for this question, honestly, like the list of questions that interviewers should expect to answer is endless. There are so many questions that you can be asked, but there are, like, in my experience, there are like 5 recurring questions that most interviewers ask. Okay, so those 5 questions, I think you should at least be prepared for those questions. By the way, like I mentioned before, you should be prepared to answer any question, but those 5 questions is a must. You must take extra time to prepare for those 5 questions. And the first question out of those questions is, tell me about yourself, right? If you're waking up from sleep around 6 a.m. or 4 a.m., you should be able to answer that question any time of the day, throughout the interview season. Okay, so basically prepare for that question. And for that question, you don't have to go the conventional way, starting from like when you are 1 year old up until now. No, you can start from like your present. Okay, I'm this right now, and go backwards. So there's no specific way to answer that question, but just make it short, and make it interesting, like engaging, so that it's going to be interactive and they can ask questions based off your response. Okay, that's the first question. Second question, I think programs you should expect to answer is why did you apply to that specific program? That question is usually very, very commonly asked, and you should be able to answer that question. Why are you applying to a program specifically? Next question you should be prepared to answer is, why the subspecialty? Okay, why the specialty? For instance, if you're applying to pathology, why you're applying to pathology? I mean, there are so many other specialties in medicine. Why you're applying to pathology specifically? The fourth question is questions about your CV and personal statement. Okay, you submitted all those things are in your application packet. So anything in your application packet, you should be able to answer questions surrounding that. Like if you have a specific maybe event that occurred in your life, in your personal statement, you should be able to defend that, and anything you say you put in your CV and your personal statement, it has to be consistent with what you answer during the interview day. You can't say put story A in your CV, and now they're asking you this about story A. You're basically regurgitating about story B. It has to be the same thing, like consistent. You can add some things, you can expatiate on it, but it has to be like the same thing, because otherwise it means you're not truthful with your application. And the last question that I think applicants should be ready to answer is your future plans. Like, I mean, after residency, what else? what are you going to do? So sometimes, I mean, in my experience, it's good to have an open mind, but it's also good to actually have something like in mind. Okay, I'm not sure I'm going to go into academia or private practice, but I mean, I'm considering this. Maybe later I'm going to change my mind. Just have something, in the works, so that it's going to be like, oh, this person knows exactly what she's doing, and basically that makes you a better candidate in my experience. That's all basically. But remember, it's you can the list of questions is really endless. So be prepared to answer any questions. But those questions are the questions I feel like any time of the day you should be able to answer those questions. Those 5 questions I just mentioned.
Thank you, Dr. Olupeju. Does any of the other panelists want to chime in?
He said it all.
Okay.
I concur.
So on the next question now, on the flip side, are there specific questions that applicants should ask program directors or residents during interviews? And then, yeah. I want to direct this question to Dr. Lely.
Yeah, I mean, we've kind of already touched on a few of the things that you should definitely be looking at for programs for sure. If we're talking about specifically to like program directors, I think that you'll be interacting with the program director a lot during your residency, and especially, I mean, a lot of people don't even think about it. You'll be interacting with the coordinator a lot too. So it's also important to pay attention to those steps even before the interview happens. But and also be kind to everyone, because everyone is involved with the with the choice here. But the things to ask the program director, I think it's really important to ask about specific examples of like how things have changed or responses to certain things. I think it's always helpful to get concrete examples of things, because everyone could say we have a great culture. It's like, okay, well then could you give me some examples of that? Like, do you guys go like do happy hours or whatever? That's always something that's probably more for like residents. But then if you're thinking about how is the curriculum tailored to your residents, you could ask about like how residents have how residents learn, how are they evaluated, what are some examples of some of those educational initiatives, have things changed, especially if there's a new program director, you want to know kind of like what the direction of the program is, all of that kind of stuff. I know that was a big thing for UCLA. They had just had a new program director. They had just had some changes to the curriculum. I wanted to know all about that. So those are definitely questions you want to ask the program director. Other things, you could always ask them about themselves, and in that you could also get a little bit more information about why they chose that as a faculty as well. I think that there's a big trickle down between faculty and residents. If the faculty are happy, the residents are usually happy too. Sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes there's, back and forth. But, if they found that they really like the support of the chair's support's probably going to affect you too. So I think those are some questions that I usually like to ask. And anything about, what's their teaching strategy? What are they like at the scope? And just getting a little bit more about what that's like, because most of your time is going to be one-on-one with an attending. So those are usually kind of what I looked at.
Great, thank you, Dr. Lily. Does any of the panelists want to add anything to that?
Yeah, also I want to add to what Colin said, that you should always ask questions with what aligns with your interest, such as if you are married, you should ask about the benefits that the program provides for its resident for married people. Or for example, if you are interested in research, you should ask about the easiness of doing research, and if the residents have time to be involved in research projects. And if you have, for example, a preference for a certain subspecialty like derm path, you should ask about the number of specimens that that program receives for derm path, for example. Also, I want to add about how it's important how you formulate your question, because, for example, in one of the interviews, one of the candidates asked us, can pathologists work from home in the future? And of course, the nature that he asked that question expresses laziness in that person. So, however, he could have rephrased that sentence to be like, what are the prospects of digital pathology in the future? So it is important how to phrase your question to be asked.
Just to add to that, basically you can don't be scared to ask multiple interviewers the same question. All right. Sometimes it even helps you clarify things. Sometimes people have more experience than each other in the same program. So if you ask the same, if your question has been previously addressed, you can still ask another interviewer the same question. It doesn't really matter. Just make sure, like they mentioned earlier, you don't run out of questions, because there's no way you're interested in the program and you're not going to have questions. There's no way. Like, if you really want to go to that program, you're going to have questions about the program, because you're going to spend your next 4 years of your life there.
Thank you all. That's really helpful. And then just a question I have right now, someone who's interviewing in the virtual setting. How do you recommend, and this question is for Dr. Udofia, how do you recommend the applicants assess the culture and the fit of the program? And if you think you can fit, yourself would fit as a good fit into the culture of that program?
It's very hard to do that virtually, almost impossible if you have never been in this space. So I would encourage you to speak to the residents after the interview, because the virtual environment is very stimulated. Everybody's trying to be their best, and it's an interview. The program is giving you the best, and you're also trying to put in your best. So you really can't tell if they are really happy or they are sad, but you can tell a lot from social events. So like if you attended their open house or DEIs, any other thing that doesn't have to do with the interview, people are more expressive. In that kind of setting, you can see a resident crying sometimes. So yeah, I actually saw a resident really upset during that kind of setting. So I won't do that. I won't try to access the culture during an interview. I'll do it after the interview through just communicating with the resident after the interview, like just a phone call, just to ask about normal, real questions like, how do you get to the hospital? Do you live close to the hospital? Do you have support? Do you feel supported in your program? Those kind of questions. Residents are always willing to talk more outside the interview on a phone call than during the interview. So I would speak more after the interview than during the interview. And if I can, I'll come to the city. If you're in the US, I'll visit the city and see what it's like and try to hang out with residents. Yeah.
And just to add to that, most programs actually, they try to like expose the culture of the program during the interview through maybe PowerPoints or whatever, maybe the residents interacting with the interviewer, right? But sometimes it's not properly addressed, So like Dr. Udofia mentioned, interact with the residents. They are usually your best bet at getting the correct information as to the culture of the program. But in addition to that, the faculty too can help sometimes, because some of the faculty, they have stayed in that city or town for a long time, so they're actually even more familiar with that place than the resident, So if I was going to ask the faculty, most times I usually leave it like to the tail end of the interview with that person, Don't make it towards the beginning. That's like almost like a semi-formal question. So if I've exhausted my questions towards the end of the interview with that person, I can always ask, hey, how do you, I noticed you did your residency at this. How was your transition to this new city? Sometimes it's been years, but they're going to tell you about it. So just keep it to the end of your interview session with the faculty. But with the residents, you can fire on from the beginning, because the residents, that's what they're there for. Okay, to answer these kind of questions.
And can I add, I'll speak to the first years, right? The first years, they are going to give you more honest information. The second years, the third years, they kind of have adapted to the environment and they are faithful to their program. So everything will be great about the program. So I'll speak to the first years. The first years are more raw, and if they are unhappy, you will hear it on the phone call. Yeah.
And you can also usually determine it from other questions too. Like if you're doing one of those open houses, like how they interact with each other. A lot of times, like we're like laughing and like joking with each other on our things, and like you know, at least you can kind of tell that we're friends with each other, you know, and so sometimes you can tell that with the virtual space. And sometimes with other questions, like sometimes I would ask first years, like, do you feel supported by the other residents? Because you'll be getting a lot of learning from the third, fourth year residents as well. And so if do you feel comfortable bringing cases to them? Do you feel like you have that support if you need it? Because your attending could leave and then you could have like a whole stack of things you have to preview and you can't go to them, you know, for that stuff. So you might need to have some resident help as well. So that stuff is important and that's all culture. But yeah, all of the stuff that has been said, I know it's hard to do in the virtual space, but I agree with all that.
Thank you for the insight, Dr. Lilly. So moving on to the next question. And this is directed to Dr. Maher Ali. So if applicants have a red flag on their application, should they address it directly during the interviews or only address it if they're asked about it?
Okay, so I feel this is a controversial question, and some people may prefer to be addressed, some people don't. But in my opinion, I would say only address it if you were asked about it, because they know all of these details from your application and they already sent you an interview. So in my opinion, do not bring it up and be apologetic and explain why it happened out of nowhere. However, you should be prepared to answer and explain why it happened, how you were determined, and how you overcame that problem. Also, talk briefly about how that experience taught you and how you are going to overcome it if it happened in the near future. So yeah, this is my opinion, maybe to not bring it up because they already know about it, but others may have other opinions about it.
Yeah, I had a red flag on my application and it was a course failure in like the first year of my med school. And I personally didn't even bring it up unless they specifically asked about it. And if it was brought up, I turned it into like a very positive thing and like how I overcame an obstacle and how it taught me to be a stronger resident. So just have an answer ready and don't spend too much time about all the details of what happened. Just say, yeah, it happened. I learned from it. And now I know I've learned how to be a better resident because of it. So that's pretty much all that will happen, and just try to like deviate from it a little bit. Like, don't dwell on it too much. Just say, admit it. Yep. Yes, this happened. You're right. And this is what I'm doing now. And I'm not worried about this being an issue in residency. So if it does come up, that's all my advice for it.
I completely agree with the previous two speakers because truthfully, right, if the red flag is not acceptable by the programs, you would not get an invite. The moment you get an invite, that means you 100% deserve to be there, you know, and they want you. So basically, do not address it except when prompted.
And some interviewers will be academically blinded, so they might not even see your transcript or anything. I know we have like just cultural interviews, we have just, you know, academic interviews. Some programs do that, and you know, so if you bring it up and they're like, I don't want to know, like, I don't want to know about your scores, I don't know about your grades. So, you know, that could be something that could come up as well.
And I know, like, Colin, like from the resident side, there's some residents that don't even look at grades because it doesn't matter to them. And it's like they want to find someone who fits into the culture of that program. So, you know, they're going to be working with you all the time and they want to like you and have you around. So they're going to focus on you more as a person. So just showcase your personality and be likable, you know, be a normal human. And I think that will bode well in your favor.
Thank you all. That was really super helpful. The next question is actually for Dr. Herman as well. After the interview, how can applicants effectively follow up, whether that be a thank you letter, thank you email, et cetera? And then specifically, when is the appropriate time and situation to be sending letters of interest or intent?
Oh, that's a good one. I know people who sent like cards to every person who interviewed with them. Me personally, that would be exhausting and my hand couldn't handle all the writing. And I didn't really find it necessary for everything. I think saying thank you for your time was enough. And I don't think it really would impact your ranking at all. It's just, if you want to send an email and say, hey, I really enjoyed talking with you about this. Here's a follow-up question, or here's my article that I wrote, or here's my Twitter or whatever. Like, if you feel like you had a connection with somebody, go ahead and follow up and say, hey, like, here's that thing I said I would send you, or hey, you were talking about this and we got cut off. Can you send me more about it? I mean, that's appropriate. And if you really enjoyed your time, say, I really enjoyed my time interviewing with you guys. And, you know, I look forward to, you know, if you really, really like them, fine. You can tell I really enjoyed, I'll think of you guys highly. But I wouldn't tell everyone, oh, you're my number one, you're my number two. Like, don't tell numbers at all, right? Like, you got to play the game. So my advice is, like, when you decide your number one program, send it like right around the time you submit your match, right? Like, when you have sent it in and you are good to go, send it in, because you might change your mind in the next few days. So okay, so let me sum it up here. Thank yous, you can do what you want. If you're a thank you card person, do it. Just keep in mind, it's a lot of work and I don't think it's necessary. No one's expecting it. You don't have to say anything to them for months, like, you know, until you decide your rank list. Send one letter to one program director, and that's it. Hopefully that makes sense.
That was very helpful information. Thank you, Dr. Herman. And for my next question, it's directed to Dr. Olapaju. So how important are the secondary events that programs have for interviewers?
So most times, just know that those secondary programs, in my experience, they are not really to assess you. Okay, I mean, the fact that you got an invite means that they know that you are you probably would make a good fit to the program. You know, like, you're academically sound and everything. You know, so don't think about that. Those events are not to assess you. Okay, those events are just for you to, like, familiarize yourself to the program. Okay, it's usually the program's way of, I mean, get of them letting you know the program better. You know, that's my experience with those programs and those things. You know, so don't use it as a time to say, hey, I want to show the program that I know about this. No, just enjoy the program. So for most of those things, I mean, the programs usually appreciate when you ask one or two questions. Just keep it short, one or two questions, maybe, which is not necessary. Okay, if you have them, ask questions, right? Just try to engage a little bit, you know. But otherwise, don't look at it as, hey, I have to be the person that asks the most question or something. No, don't do that. You know, just listen, pay attention. Most of the things tells you a lot about the program, the way the program is structured. I mean, the way they communicate with you. You know, all those things tells you a little bit about more information about the program. But so just use it as a tool to get more familiar with the program, and don't think about it as a form of assessment for yourself. You know, that's my advice on this.
Thank you, Larry. That's super helpful as well. Because with those things, you never really know what is expected of you as the applicant, and, you know, what you're supposed to really get out of them. But it's really helpful. Next question is for Dr. Lilly. Doximity rankings, and, you know, just rankings of, in general, prestige of programs. How much weight should applicants put into that when they're considering their rank lists?
That's a great question. And they've changed so much over the last, like, year. I think, like, even our program's changed like 5 or 10 spots. Like, it's so hard to even predict what these things even put in there. I think you can find the algorithm online, but I had it as part of my algorithm, but it wasn't anywhere near the top of what I had. I had like a whole Excel spreadsheet, and I like ranked each individual part. I was like, I'm very analytical like that. So I thought about all the things that make me happy. I thought about all the things that I wanted in a program, and I kind of put them all into these categories. And I was like, this is a 10 for this spot. This is like a 2 for this. And, like, you know, so I kind of had that. And interestingly, at the end, everything ends up kind of being the same. You know, like, you have things that are great in one program, things that are not so great, and then you have a really good thing. It's, you know, it's all kind of all over the place. But the thing is, an advice that I got that I really do take to heart, and I've heard this multiple times, for pathology, it's often the resident that makes a good pathologist. It's not usually the program that makes a good pathologist. You can skate by in any program. But if you're driven, if you want to teach, if you want to do research, if you want to be a better pathologist, you're going to do good no matter where you go. So go to a place that makes you happy, go to a place that you connected with. For some people that's geography. I know that was part of my algorithm was geography. For some people it's weather or what's around the program, or it's fellowships. Maybe you want to stay for fellowship and they have the fellowship that you want. All of those are good considerations, and it's going to be different for everyone. At the end of the day, I had all of this stuff and I kind of had everything within like a point of each other. So I think it all just depends on what you want to do. And prestige is always nice for if you want to say, oh, I go here, but not everyone really cares about that. So that's my 2 cents. But at the end of the day, it's really personal, and you're probably going to be thinking about it for hours and hours and hours after you finish your last interview. So you'll perseverate over it enough. I think the Doximity rankings aren't necessarily the most important.
I'd say I totally agree with that. I don't know how that's all. I heard there's like some like, I don't know if there's a political aspect to it, but I heard that's like not always like 100% true how these rankings are. So like you can look at it, but don't like take it too much to heart. I think what matters more is your ranking. Like what your ranking is, like basically dictates where you go for residency. So focus more on that rank list rather than Doximity rank.
And even with the hospital rankings this year, the top 30 are all the same now, right? So, or the top 20 are all the same. So, it's going to be pretty similar, even with like the most prestigious programs. The top 20 are all probably equal, in terms of their prestige. Maybe they've been around longer. I don't know, but that's basically it.
Thank you for that helpful insight. Going off of that. So as an applicant, what are some of the red flags to look out for when deciding on a program? This question will be directed to Dr. Urufia.
That was very hard to do virtually. So I don't know, like red flags in your program. I guess just trying to see if residents are given the education that they deserve and if they are supported. And how do you really tell from a virtual interview? I don't know, it's really hard. And because in my experience, I think most programs will give you what you came to do. You came to be a pathologist in 4 years, which is not even enough, right? So I don't know, red flags in your program. I really don't know what red flags in your program would be, because most of those programs are accredited, so they're really going to give you all the things you need. So the only thing I can think about is maybe there was a resident that had a difficulty and wasn't supported adequately, or as an international student, are you able to fit into that program? So I think red flags would be also specific to individuals, because I know if you're coming as an international student, you need a lot of support. And if you're coming to a program where you don't have a lot of IMGs, you might feel like displaced, and you might feel different. So is your program, do they have a history of supporting IMGs, or you might have difficulty with visas? And will the program support you throughout that period of your difficulty? So I think red flags would be specific to the individual. For me, when I was banking, I was looking at support in terms of maybe if something happens, if you're sick during residency, how is the program going to accommodate you? Is the program flexible? What kind of vacations are you allowed to take? Like my program, we do like 1 week every rotation. Other programs might give you 3 weeks. And how much are you giving at the end? What is your salary? And what is it? Is there a lunch stipend? Are you giving free lunches? So support would be what kind of support do you want as a resident? What kind of support do you need? And I think it differs for every applicant.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like if there's like a good diversity and equity inclusion component to the program, and if there's wellness efforts, if they support your wellness. One I remember being my concerns or like my red flags is if there were like a lot of changes going on within the program and they didn't have like core rotation sites available for residents. Like some programs, they were like, oh, we lost our rotation site for autopsies, so we're sending residents out of state to such and such place, or oh, we don't have neuropathology, so we just give you a few lectures. And I'm like, but that's not enough for boards. So I was like looking at the board passing rate for AP and CP, and I'm like, well, what are you guys doing to help residents who aren't passing their boards, you know? So that was a red flag for me, like if they just didn't have the proper rotations and they didn't have good solutions for those. That was a big red flag for me.
I agree with the previous two speakers. I just wanted to add something. So for in terms of red flags varies by individuals. You know, what's a red flag for me might not be a red flag for Jerome. You know, and vice versa. You know, so it really varies. But ultimately, it's very hard to come about red flag in a program because remember these programs are ACGMA accredited. But of course, it's not uncommon to actually see like a red flag. You know, to what you consider a red flag. I remember I was interviewing for fellowship recently, just actually some months ago, and there was this program. This program is a really big program, very big. You know, it's one of those what's it called, Ivy League programs. You know, and when I interviewed with a fellow, you know, in the program, the fellow, if to me, I felt it was overwhelmed. You know, so like if I felt like it was going on more procedures than actually having time to study. You know, so that's usually something that I personally I wanted to look out for. I was looking out for it with each program, like, hey, I want to learn the material and stuff, but at the same time, I want to have time to, you know, study. You know, so because if you're for pathology applicants, pathology is a mixture of learning from slides and self-directed learning. You know, so if you don't have sufficient time to actually consolidate what you're learning, you probably would not make so much progress as you go on in your residency. So that to me, that was one of the red flags I was looking out for. Like, I don't want to go to a program where I'm going to be grossing all day until 10 p.m. continuously, and basically I won't have time to like consolidate whatever I'm learning in other areas. So that's something you all should look out for, like, as to me, as a red flag. You know, so like I just mentioned, red flags varies from individuals, but it's not uncommon to actually have red flags in a program. But I think I want to direct this to IMGs. You know, I mean the American graduates, they are familiar with the specialty, you know, because most of them have done rotations in that, you know. But I remember my experience as an IMG coming to pathology. I knew some things, but there's some things I did not expect, because pathology, I'm from Nigeria, by the way. Pathology in Nigeria is a little bit different from the way pathology is practiced here. You know, the way the pathology in America, like the pathologist is like literally in charge of the entire lab. You know, that's not the way it is in Nigeria. Okay, so if you don't do your research about a specific specialty, you might be surprised, and you might actually get frustrated when you get in and want to change specialties. I had friends that switched specialties because they didn't know that they were going to experience what they experienced when they came in. Okay, so just make sure you do your research thoroughly as an IMG as to the specialty you're going to apply to, and so so that you will not be surprised as to what you'll see when you come in. You know, that's my advice.
And similar along those lines, I think, you know, grossing is a huge part of pathology learning. And that's something that I know varies a lot between programs, you know, whether you're grossing a lot or a little. And that's not something that's bad. I don't want people to think that grossing is bad, because I do get questions in interviews that make it seem like people don't want to gross. And the problem with that is you still have to, right? And you also don't want to be pinned as not a team player. Like, if someone is sick, you might have to take over their grossing, and you don't want to be the person that's like, I don't want to gross at all. So that's one thing. But the other thing that's important along the lines of grossing is, what's the PA support like? Do you feel like you have support in the gross room? Because a lot of that learning is going to be kind of on your own, or with a PA or with a senior. So that's kind of important there. But I do caution how you ask the questions about grossing, because some people do come off very averse to grossing when it's actually probably one of the more important parts, because you have to know what it looks like grossly and how that fits into your slide. Because if you get a slide as an attending, you're like, I know what happened here. They grossed it wrong, or they did something a weird way. You have to understand both of those. And you also want to seem like a team player, and still you need to learn all that stuff.
Thank you. That's really, really super helpful. And since we probed the topic a little bit, kind of question, posing towards all of you, what special considerations through this whole process should international medical graduates take, whether it's through the looking into programs, through the interview, and then after the interview? Could you just shed some light on what special considerations they should take?
Hi. Yes, as an IMG, you have to understand the visa requirement for your country. I know someone who was able to match, but his country wasn't able to process the statement of need that is needed for J1 visa. And that is really sad. And he went unmatched for, actually, he didn't go to his program, and he lost his position in that certain program. Also, if you are done with step 3, and for example, the program don't have H1B visa, and you prefer to have H1B visa, so that should be put into consideration in your choices, of course. And once you have got an interview, you have to demonstrate your language proficiency, of course, and to be able to work and communicate with others. And that's why programs look for the recommendation letters, and they prefer applicants with previous US experience, because that proves that that applicant can communicate and can work in the US working environment. And I have to tell for all IMGs, they have to be flexible in their preferences to maximize their chances in matching. And of course, always, you have to be persistent and positive. And if it didn't work this year, aim for the next year and the year after. So yes, it's really helpful to do that.
I'm just going to add one more thing to that. Very, very important, networking, okay? If you are an IMG and you apply to a program, or you want to apply to a program, you need to network, okay? Try to meet, maybe communicate with the residents or what the attendants in the program. Just try to network. The reason I said that is because, I mean, a lot of my friends that have gotten into programs, they probably they reached out to somebody that just told the program director about them, and then the program director dug out their application from somewhere, and basically after reviewing the application, they invited them for the interview. So if you don't network sometimes, because I mean, think about it, a program has 3 spots, there are about 8,000 applicants. The program director, I mean, might try to read all the applications, but most times they don't get to read everything, So just to point attention at your application so that they can go through it. Try to network with somebody, hey, just a resident or whatever, that can put in a good word for you. Somebody you have worked with previously or something, I mean, sometimes people recommend LinkedIn. I mean, personally, I recommend conferences. If you can just go for one conference, just one. Don't have to go for like so many, just one, maybe like CAP conference, US CAP, just go for one conference if you can, if it's possible. Even if you attend virtually, just go for one conference, network with the people in that field. That gives you to me, it gives you more chances or more interviews, which will improve your chances.
Thank you so much for that helpful information, Dr. Olopeju. So now on the flip side of talking about the red flags, so can some of the panelists provide some concrete examples of some green flags that to look out for? And as a specific question, what made you choose your particular pathology program? And we can ask each panelist if that's okay.
I can start. So green flags to me, like, I mean, why? Okay, let me just start with why I chose my program. Okay, why I chose my program, where, I mean, the first thing that, I mean, was when I was researching about my program. I mean, like we mentioned earlier, most programs, all the programs are ACGM accredited, so that means they are actually standard programs. But there are things that, you know, like things that you used to prefer a program over the other. Okay, one of the things is the quality of training. Okay, so one thing I did was every program I wanted to go to, like I looked at their past precedents, okay, where they are currently, like what are they doing currently? Oh, did they get a good fellowship that they needed? You know, are they getting a good jobs? You know, afterwards, you know. So if, for instance, I want to go into academia, okay, all right, I will look at the current fellows or the previous residents that went to academia in that program. Are they doing what I intend to do in the future? Those are the things that I usually do, that I did when I was applying for like my residency. So I think that usually helps. That's one. Another thing that made me choose my program was the location. You know, like, I mean, I like the city life, but sometimes I can get pretty distracted with the city, you know. So I wanted a place that would be a little bit, you know, in between, suburban, you know, where I'm going to have time to study at the same time. You know, I can, if I want to go to the city, I can drive 3 hours or something, you know. So I look for like a location where that basically it's around so many cities, but I'm not currently doing my residency in a big city, you know, per se. So I have minimal distractions, but when I want to have fun, it's just usually around, you know, I can drive 3-4 hours. Another thing is you want a program that basically has good balance between didactics, that's the academic sessions, and service work, like grossing or other things, you know. So you don't want a program that we are going to be working all the time and you have no time to, like, you know, study. I've said that before previously. That's something I look at in my program. But at the same time, you want a program that exposes you to a wide variety of specimens, because that's where you learn from. Like, for instance, on the AP side, you need to actually be, the more you're exposed to different specimens, the better pathologist you become, you know. So you have to find that balance. A program that has that balance, that a lot of specimens, at the same time you have quality didactics and time to you know, consolidate the material. And those are the things I look at in my program. And lastly, one of the major thing that made me run my program first was the interview. Okay, the interview, the attending, all the faculty I met, they were very nice. The residents, they basically treated me like family already, you know. So I saw the camaraderie between the residents and the faculty right there in the interview, and that was when I made up my mind that I'm going to this program, you know. So those are the things that you should consider when you're actually applying to a program.
So we're talking about like the good green flags that we had and why we chose the program. Okay, so my green flags, especially for Michigan, was obviously location. It was a good fit for my husband and I and my family, like being close to my family. Michigan is a really like well-known institution because I grew up in Michigan and I was very familiar with the care that they provide. So I was very excited about the mission of Michigan. And I also found like there was a lot of resources for residents, and residents seemed very happy and that they had everything they needed to succeed. And I really didn't see any red flags with them. They had a lot of fellowships, they had research support, they had excellent benefits in a union. So it was all like checking the boxes for me. And I also felt like a very good fit in their program, especially during the open house. I really felt like I connected with a lot of the residents. My personality meshed well with everybody there. So that kind of led me to rank that program really highly. So it's just about like the vibe you get from the program. Like, where am I going to be happy? And I thought about that when I made my rank list, like my top, I really spent a lot of time thinking about my top 3 programs, because I'm like, well, it's very likely you can get your second choice or your third choice, and just be prepared for that reality. So yeah, just think about that carefully and see where you're going to be happiest.
Yeah, I think I agree with what Meredith and Ola said. So I vibed well with my program during all my interactions. When the open house, oh, we didn't have open house, we had DEI events, and during the interview, I just felt like I could be myself, and that's why I used to rank. So I didn't think too much about it. I knew I wanted to come here, and I felt really good about the program.
Yeah, I liked they'll usually throw out a bunch of numbers during the like first session. They'll say we have this many surgical specimens, we have this many cyto specimens, and that didn't mean anything to me at the beginning. But at the end, when I kind of like looked at what everyone had said, I had seen that like UCLA had a really high volume, but they weren't overwhelmed. So I liked, as Larry had said, you're going to see all the material you need to see, and so I really liked that. I also liked how they had a program director who was really involved with education, and that was another part that I love education. I also want to be a good pathologist, and so I thought that was another thing, another green flag. I liked how the residents were interacting with each other, as well as like what we talked about at open house. Like everyone was talking about food, and I was like, that's 100% me. I love food, so that was something that was another thing. And then like everyone said, the geography is important, and all of those other things play into it. But another thing for me, I'm like CP, I'm APCP, but I really like CP, so I find that important, and so I always asked questions about CP. I threw some like questions that I asked in the chat, but like one of the ones I found early on, if you ask like, is the CP education interactive or is it hands-on, everyone will say yes. But if you ask questions like, could you walk me through a day in the life of a resident on chemistry? Some people will say we just watch lectures and then we go home. So that's something to consider. I love microbiology. I haven't ruled it out yet, so I don't want to go to a place that I just show up and then leave. So that those are things that all important, and also the green flags that I found. And I found many green flags almost, I mean, everywhere that I interviewed has green flags. I think pathology as a whole is a great field and people are generally happy. So
I have to second what others said. For me, green flag was the dynamic between the residents. You don't want to get out to spend 4 years in a negative environment. So you have to look for the verbal and non-verbal cues, how the residents interact with each other, how often do they get together after work hours. For me, I'm currently at George Washington University, and it's in DC, and I actually ranked it first on my list. And it was about the excitement of living the city in the nation's capital, next to all the monuments and museums. And also I had friends in the city, and that was something I considered during ranking. And also, I like the education curriculum here, where the residents have at least one activity a day, and it is a protected time for residents to either attend a lecture or do slides unknown. And also the resources that they provide for residents other than the education stipend is a green flag and something to consider. Also, you have to look for the fellowship opportunities that the graduates go into. Do they go to other hospitals? What hospitals do they go to? And you have to see your preferences regarding what do you prefer in that certain program.
Thank you all so much. It's helpful and cool to hear what drew you all to your specific programs. And I mean, now we just like to open it up to the audience for any other questions. I've seen the chat has been going with really great questions, and thank you to the panelists for getting in there and answering. But if anyone else has any other questions, we only have a few more minutes, so please feel free to ask now.
There was a question in the chat about if you got certified, should you let the program know? I guess this is for IMG specific.
Honestly, I really don't think it matters. I mean, if the program sends you for an invites you for an interview, like they already feel like you can be part of them. So you don't have to like tell the program I'm CFM certified or not. I mean, one thing I think can matters is step 3 for IMGs. Okay, if you recently just wrote step 3 and passed it during the interview period, I mean that can factor into you can tell them but being CFM certified, I don't think so.
All right, well, if there aren't any further questions, I guess we will wrap up there. Thank you all again to each one of our panelists and everyone on the team, and all of you all for joining. It's been a really great event, and keep an eye out on our social medias for other events of our fall symposium. Next weekend, we also have a few events going on, so please check those out, and please join us next week as well.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Good luck, everyone.